This is Wesley's journey from Paraguay. I interviewed Wesley, a 26-year-old Paraguayan former pastor, 3 times over the course of September and October. We went over culture, language, his transition to the U.S., and more. He came to the U.S. at 18 years old with his family for a better life. Spanish was his first language, but he did have the opportunity to learn English during his time in a private high school in Paraguay. He also had the experience of both public and private school in the country. During our first 2 conversations, we spoke about various aspects of his culture. Gestures and kinesics and taboos were the 2 we went most in depth with. In Paraguay, there is no such thing as personal space. That's what he told me. Closeness and affection seems deep-rooted in the Paraguayan culture. Unlike the U.S., Paraguayans are constantly in each other's personal space when speaking to each other. It is also customary to kiss each other on the cheek hello, even to complete strangers. Wesley told me if he walked in a room and saw a woman he did not know, he was expected to walk up to each one of them, kiss them on both cheeks, and introduce himself. If he did not do so, it was seen as a sign of disrespect. Paraguayan culture is deeply rooted in Catholicism. With these roots came a few taboos. Homosexuality is absolutely not accepted, Wesley told me. LGBTQ rights do not exist in Paraguay. People of this population were openly persecuted and looked down upon. Tattoos were another one of these taboos. Tattoos weren't something you saw on everyone. In fact, it was often seen as a symbol of you having been to jail. His father, who was a missionary, lost out on quite a few opportunities to the fact that he had an arm tattoo. Many people assumed he had gone to jail and made judgments on his character because of his tattoo. Spanish was Wesley's first language and the most common language in Paraguay. Like English, Spanish comes from Latin, so it shares many similarities to English. There are many cognates between the 2 languages, such as motor, idea, and menu. Sentence structures in both languages are most commonly SVO, meaning subject, verb, object was the order. Both languages also share the same alphabet with a few exceptions, these being the letters N, Y, and L. Spanish and English, as you can tell, also share a few differences. In Spanish, each letter always makes the same sound, while in English there are many rules when it comes to these sounds that often contradict each other. Period verb placement is another difference. The placement is opposite between the languages. The verb comes after what is describing, while in English it comes before. In Spanish, words also have genders, which influences how they interact with other words. There are also many phrases in Spanish that do not quite translate correctly in English. The phrases is for I am hungry and it is sunny directly translate to I have hunger and it makes sun. There are many more similarities and differences between the 2 languages. These are just a few. Learning about Spanish gave me a few ideas on how to teach ELL students. The great advantages for Spanish speakers is that they do not have to completely dismantle their understanding of the language. I can take advantage of the similar sounds of the letters to teach basic English words. We can also teach students common sounds instead of confusing them with all the confusing rules in English. I can also provide cheat sheets to these students, including common phrases and reminding them of verb placement. We can use these as a guide, but not a crutch. Lastly, we can take advantage of the abundance of cognates between the 2 languages. There is quite a large list of words that mean and are spelled exactly the same way. Another big topic of our conversation was the education system in Paraguay. Wesley explained to me how there were vast differences in the experiences between students in private and public schools. Students from private schools had quite a bit more opportunities than those in public schools. The goal of private schools were to prepare students for college, usually in other countries such as the US. Most of these schools had access to modern technology, which allowed them to learn more effectively. Class schedules also had no leeway for change. Students wore uniforms and were expected to behave a certain way. Parent involvement was also huge for these students. Families also often made donations to schools in order to make sure their children had the proper materials they needed to learn. Teachers were more qualified in these schools. Public schools were a different story. These teachers were often unqualified and only became teachers because their family had teachers in them. The goal of public schools was to train young people for the workforce in contrast to college. By high school, students were expected to have a choice in which would determine which track they would be on. These students also usually do not have access to modern technology such as smartboards, computers, and internet because lack of funding. As these schools were often underfunded, there were also no after-school programs other than sports. Soccer, however, was a huge deal throughout the country. Because of these experiences, Paraguayan students from public schools to U.S. schools needed some accommodations. Some of these recommendations included gaining contact with their parents, allowing the students extra time with equipment, and providing them handouts with pictures on how to access electronic programs. Getting parents involved is a key determining factor in the student's success, and communicating with their parents are also ways to teach us to help make students more comfortable. Allowing students extra time with the equipment allows them to become more familiar with the equipment as it becomes easier to maneuver. The handouts we provide them should have pictures on how to access the electronic programs and will be a visual aid to help support visual learners, along with reinforcing it with verbal instruction.